Welcome to the Rasputin episode of the Archetypal Mosaic. I'm Mikhail Tank. On the phone, I have a very special guest, Christopher Stacy, the author of the script for my version of Rasputin's story. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be speaking with you again.
It's great to be speaking with you, and the topic that we're going to discuss today, Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin, is a historical figure, an archetypal figure, somebody who has been vilified and branded in this world in a caricatured way. There are music stores with this name. There are beers with this name, which are all not related to this conversation directly. But the caricature of Rasputin has been utilized in so many different ways. Let's talk about the real guy. Now, you've done a lot of research for the script. How would you define or categorize the real persona?
To put it rather succinctly, and for the sake of brevity, I would say that I came out of my interview with the perception that Rasputin epitomized the tragically flawed protagonist or hero, that he was a person with numerous outstanding, admirable qualities, but that he was, by all means, imperfect. And I think that's the type of protagonist or hero that most attracts me, and why I found the work particularly stimulating and engrossing. To put it in superhero terms, he is much more Batman or Bruce Wayne than he is Superman or Clark Kent. And I think that a protagonist or hero with human flaws is all the more interesting.
Fallible, indeed. We're going to discuss a little bit about Rasputin's life, of course, but in the meantime, he's known in the world for several things. As a crazy monk, he's known as somebody who has been very well endowed, as is noticeable in a museum currently, I believe, still. He's known as somebody who healed not only the hemophiliac son of the Tsar, but also many, many people in the village and the villages in Siberia where he originally resided. He's known as somebody who traveled and explored many destinations and wrote a diary about it. He is a father whose one of his daughters, Maria, published several books about him. I have the original version of that book, which is very splendid. So he was a husband, a father, a priest, somebody who belonged to several sects of the Orthodox religion, and somebody who was a healer and who also had quite a very magnetic, powerful personality. There's a lot of good, a tremendous amount of good, which has been kind of swept under the rug for this kind of googly-eyed, crazy-looking, over-the-top, really tall man that we just see in a photo and go, "Ooh, that's creepy," or "That's scary." And instead of looking way deeper into the reality of the situation. Now, his daughter wrote in the very first chapter of the book, My Father, about the night that he was murdered. She described in detail how she hid his boots, how she and the other daughter had a premonition of him not to have gone out that night, but he didn't listen to them. She discussed how horrible it was when they woke up and realized that something had gone wrong, and he received a phone call from a family friend discussing that something had gone wrong, and then slowly they realized what had happened. During the funeral, the daughter was present. It was in a small location somewhere in the royal vicinity, and the Empress was there, the Tsarina. But so many of the people who requested Rasputin's assistance and help, they weren't present. It's one of those fair weather friends kind of things. So many of them back then. What kind of impact did Rasputin have on that population at that time and on the current population anywhere in the world? What would you say?
Well, I think that he is remembered more so for the myth than the man himself, and that throughout history, as more time has passed, the character of the man is remembered more so than the man himself, where he has been popularized, as you previously mentioned, in pop culture and the names of beers and whatnot, and that in so doing, the reality of the man has been forgotten to the winds of time. And I think that's unfortunate because he was all of those things that you've previously mentioned. A tremendously devout family man and father, and a healer to so many. And as much as a source of controversy, he was also a source of inspiration and hope to so many people, both in the capital city as well as in villages throughout Siberia and the rest of Russia at large. And I think that's unfortunate that he is remembered more so as a myth than a man.
Now, we're going to talk a little about his youth. I want you to tell the audience about the loss of his siblings, about some of the things, how he connected with animals. But first, I want to tell the audience a couple of things. The film that Chris and I have been collaborating on for the past more than a decade is, you can read a little bit about it on IMDb if it's still up there, hopefully. Also, if you're interested in financing the feature film, you can contact me via mikhailtank.com, the website. There will be a track, an audio performance track, a Dark Soul Theater audio performance track, which I have written, which will be released at some time around Halloween. And the script, as well as the diaries of Rasputin, are currently available via Amazon. So these are some ways for you to get familiar with our project. In the meantime, though, we're going to go back to the very beginning. Chris, please tell the audience a little bit about Rasputin's very kind of both dreary and also loving and magnetic childhood.
Yes, and I want you to get the pronunciation for me correct so that I am continuing to say the name of his hometown village correct throughout the interview. Is it Poltoroskoye? Is that how you say it in Russian?
Oh, man. See, good question. I don't want to...
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Just a little on the spot. Why don't we just say a village in Siberia that I need to learn how to pronounce properly?
Okay, so be it. I can agree to that. He was born and raised in a very small, remote Siberian village, far removed from the throes of modern society as it was in the early 20th century in Russia. And he had two younger siblings, Maria and, if I'm not mistaken, Dmitri. Yes?
Please continue.
Yes, Dmitri was his brother. And they were a very close, loving family. Tragedy befell this family very early on in Rasputin's life, as both his younger sister Maria and his little brother Dmitri, within a matter of a couple of years of one another, both drowned in the Tura River, the river outside their hometown. And Rasputin felt cursed from that day forward that somehow he was responsible for their death, even though he was an innocent bystander, and that somehow, someday, that their fate would also be his fate. And tragically, that did in fact prove to be the case.
And he wasn't only a bystander. I mean, he really jumped in there and tried to help them horribly, right?
In both instances, not only was he completely
interestingly enough, it was the drowning that killed him. The freezing and the drowning that killed him. It wasn't the gunshot wounds either. It's interesting that, we started working on this project because he died supposedly on December 30th in St. Petersburg, of course of a different year than my birth, but I was born on a December 30th in St. Petersburg. This, among many, many other kind of correlations, led to a certain kind of empathy and care, of not just vilifying and throwing away somebody who was so beneficial and helpful to society in so many ways. Now, Chris, Rasputin also had the magnetism to heal. What happened in the forest?
In the forest, he would travel basically from village to village as he was becoming a man and when in his late teens and early 20s, and on numerous occasions was purported to have used his mystical, religious, and holy powers to heal the sick people that he came across. Not only did he have this unique spiritual and physical connection to his fellow man, but it also applied to the manner in which he interacted with nature and animals. And I described one occasion in particular in which he came upon a very menacing wolf during his hikes. And through his magnetism and charm, he was able to soothe the wolf and calm the wolf and indeed prevent it from perhaps attacking Rasputin.
That's a beautiful, beautiful scene in the film. Now, along with healing, he was part of a religious sect which believed in sinning in order to be freed from sin later. Now, it's a very interesting kind of convoluted thought process. However, it did work in that period, in that space, which later, of course, he had to renounce and become part of the royal version of the church, which, of course, did not allow for such a constant sinning. It wasn't the point is to sin. The point was to do good. So, from your perspective, Chris, how was that transition for him from being a very, very free man to being more reserved, depending on his move into the capital at that time?
Well, it was one a change in him that he could not have undertaken on his own, and he did so under the watchful eye of a very much older and wizened religious figure, the Reverend Makary, who became Rasputin's spiritual guide as he gradually changed from being a adherent to the Klishti sect and their belief that their faith was their sin and their sin was their faith, and he eventually became a much more devout and traditional Orthodox practitioner. I don't believe that Rasputin could have made that transition had it not been with the aid and wizened words and the watchful eye of the Reverend Makary.
Isn't it interesting, though? I mean, and in some ways it makes perfect sense that the more there is sin and the more repentance there is, the closer you come to God through the constant revelation of the behavior and of reaching a higher realm. I mean, that's not necessarily, the way to go, but it makes sense in its own kind of planet, right?
Yes, I believe that the Klishti practiced what they taught, and that was that a person could become closer to God by sinning repeatedly and deliberately, and then consequently atoning for those very same sins. And so they would engage in sinful behavior for the express purpose of then being able to later repent for such sins. And this is what they taught, and this is what they practiced, and this is what Rasputin himself undertook as a young man before he eventually changed his ways.
Now, tell me, Chris, how would you like to see this film? For example, I had a chance to go to the Cannes Film Festival 10 years ago and have meetings with certain production companies and share the script there. I went there specifically with this project in mind. How do you see this film on the big screen? Like, what would you want it to be like, or anything that you'd like to share about kind of what you envision?
I would like us to remember, as we eventually work with an accomplished director, that the archetypal model I followed as I wrote the script was Joseph Campbell's hero's journey model, and that I believe that the journey that Rasputin took is similar to the journey that many heroic figures take in classical literature and film, and that I would like that hero's journey archetype to inform the shooting script and the production design and all that we throw into making this script become a finished film. That I consider Rasputin to be very much a heroic figure, flawed though he may have been. That I always treated him as such. I treated him with respect. I granted that, yes, he was flawed, but that he was ultimately an heroic protagonist, and that I would like to always allow ourselves and our collaborators to be reminded of that.
And how would you envision the premiere, the possibly red carpet premiere? Where would, if you could choose any perfect premiere, whether it would be at, the Hermitage or at the Summer Palace or anywhere in the whole world, just envisioning it, and how would it be? What would you say?
I would like it to be very formal and somewhat regal and resplendent in tone. Something that could hearken to the days of his interactions with the Russian royal family in the later stages of his life. So I would envision a very formal red carpet type premiere, be it somewhere in the Hollywood area or be it somewhere in the area of Moscow or St. Petersburg. If it would truly be premiered in his country of origin, regardless of where, that to me would be a wonderful notion. If it were to be rolled out both in Hollywood and somewhere in Russia under the same ideas, that it be a somewhat formal and regal affair.
I agree. And, in Russia, just for the audience to clarify, even though the current capital is Moscow, during the Tsar times, the capital was the city of my birth, which is the royal city of St. Petersburg, which was built by Peter the Great. Now, the other question I have for you is, imagine that you and I actually go to the village of his birth and step into the part of the river where, he lost his belief in life in a way, and when he was young, and when he had to be kind of regain his strength to live and his magnetism after all the drownings in his life. Would you want us to put a statue or a special post or a stone inscribed? What would be the perfect kind of commemorative gift that we could leave in his backyard?
I would like to leave something that spoke to his construction of his own church and the fact that he was eventually able to draw most of the townsfolk away from their existing church to his own hand-built church, and that eventually most of them began to attend his mass rather than the masses they had attended for years. And I would like to speak to that of his nature and his ability to share the word of God with his fellow man. And perhaps not unlike the nature of Rasputin himself. And I believe I would find such a journey and ceremony to be quite transformative and cathartic.
Very beautifully, clearly said, so that the image of it is translated. I saw it while you were talking. I had a chance to visit the gravesite of his daughter, the one who wrote the books about him, who really, really loved his memory and the good that he did.
Yes.
And it was an interesting, she's buried in Los Angeles, and it was just a powerful moment to be there, because I believe that her books, this is my personal opinion, I believe that her books were taken as kind of a novelty, as opposed to a clearing of a name or kind of like a family truth. And because after the first book was published, the one that I like the most, there were several additional books published with a kind of a co-author in more of an entertaining kind of way, with cover art that was rather caricature-like in the first place. So it seemed to be more of a novel, even though the writing behind it was very honest and loving and sincere. The promotion for the product was done in the same caricature way that we're trying to dispel. So it's part of the the publishing world, is to market something in a certain way that may not be 100% in parallel or in tandem with the honesty of the product. So I just want to say, for those who get a chance to read the original book, My Father, if you do, just see it for the beauty that is written in it, and the further versions of the book, and the kind of the changed additional versions of the book. In my opinion, I would probably skip. I'd stick with the original edition, because, again, the purpose of this is to really show the tremendous amount of good. I mean, just imagine if you still are wondering, how could this guy be any good? How can the royal family, this is just one of many things, how can the royal family, how can entire villages, and how can his own family have loved him and appreciated him as much as they did if he was really just bad, right?
Well, what I find interesting that I am recollecting as we're discussing literature about Rasputin is how difficult the research portion of this project was for me. Mm-hmm. That it was difficult to find objective material about Rasputin. That most of what I found was written in a caricature type style, or in a style that deliberately failed to present the true story and all the facts about Rasputin. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that there isn't more out there about Rasputin that is objective and dispassionate.
And precisely to add to that, all the movies that are out there and all the stuff that's in the media usually begins to take place right after he, gets invited to the palace to heal Alexei. However, how he became who he became is usually minuscule and completely forgotten. And, when I originally had this idea, how is this movie going to be different? What's going to be special about it? I was like, anybody with that kind of magnetism and healing power, how did they become that way? How? And that's
the far more interesting story, in my opinion.
Yes, and that's what our film is about, is how he became this incredible person who is forever, it seems, misunderstood.
It's why, to me, to draw a parallel, the Star Wars prequels were as interesting as the original Star Wars movie, because I always yearned to find out how Anakin Skywalker became Darth
So you've been listening to Christopher, Stacy, and I discuss Rasputin, our admiration for the many, many good things that he did. And again, I invite you to check out, IMDb. I invite you to, if you or someone you may know is interested in financing the feature film, to go to my website, MikhailTank.com, and fill out the contact form there. To check out the script, as well as Rasputin's Diaries on Amazon, and to enjoy my track called Rasputin, available worldwide via digital outlets. Chris, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
Just to, again, keep an open mind about the person that you may think you know, but you actually do not know all that much about with respect to the man and not the myth of Grigory Rasputin.
May or may not.
And that I look forward to the day that this project comes to fruition and is a feature film.
Bravo. And to the audience who may know about Rasputin, perhaps even more than we do, we say, fantastic. Maybe you can share that with us. And if any of the family members of Rasputin are listening to this interview, I would be very interested in interviewing you. So please contact me on MikhailTank.com as well. Thank you everybody for listening, and until next time, blessings.